The entire restaurant went silent when the arrogant woman grabbed the waitress by her apron and violently tore it down the middle. A tray crashed onto the marble floor, glasses shattered, and every eye turned toward 28-year-old Hannah Brooks, who stood frozen with tears filling her eyes. The woman, Victoria Hayes, looked at Hannah as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience. She had no idea that the waitress she had just humiliated was hiding a secret that would completely change the balance of power in the room. And she certainly didn't know that, only seconds later, the most powerful man in the restaurant would walk through the front door looking for one person, his wife. Before we continue, if you believe kindness matters, that people deserve second chances, and that we should never judge someone by their clothes or their job, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes the same, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon in Chicago, Illinois, and the elegant Belmont House restaurant was unusually busy. Hannah had been working there for nearly 2 years. She wore the same navy blue uniform every day, tied her dark hair into a neat bun, and greeted every customer with patience even when they treated her badly. Most people assumed she was struggling financially because she lived simply and never wore expensive jewelry. They didn't know that Hannah had deliberately chosen this life. She wanted to understand what it felt like to work from the bottom again, because years earlier, she had promised herself that wealth would never change the way she treated ordinary people. That promise had become even more important after she married Jonathan Brooks, a self-made billionaire whose technology company had become one of the fastest-growing businesses in America. Jonathan and Hannah had agreed to keep their marriage private. Hannah didn't want special treatment, and Jonathan respected that. She worked at Belmont House under her maiden name, Hannah Carter, and almost nobody knew that she was married to one of the richest men in the country. Jonathan occasionally visited the restaurant, but he always came quietly, without security or attention. Hannah loved that arrangement because it allowed her to see people's true character. That afternoon, Victoria Hayes entered the restaurant wearing an expensive designer coat and carrying a handbag that probably cost more than Hannah's annual salary. She was the wife of a prominent real estate developer and had developed a reputation for treating employees as if they were invisible. She arrived with 2 friends and immediately complained about the table, the temperature, the menu, and even the flowers. Hannah approached with her usual polite smile, but Victoria barely looked at her. When Hannah carefully explained that the restaurant was crowded and the kitchen needed several extra minutes, Victoria's expression hardened. A few minutes later, Hannah accidentally noticed that Victoria's young daughter had dropped a small diamond bracelet beneath the table. Hannah quietly picked it up and placed it beside Victoria's handbag. Instead of receiving gratitude, Victoria accused her of touching her belongings without permission. Hannah calmly explained what had happened, but Victoria was already angry. She stood up and began criticizing Hannah's uniform, saying that someone dressed like her had no business serving people in an establishment of this quality. The other customers became uncomfortable, but nobody intervened. Then everything escalated. Victoria reached forward, grabbed Hannah's apron, and pulled it sharply. The fabric ripped with a loud tearing sound. Hannah stumbled backward, nearly falling into a nearby table. A tray slipped from her hand and crashed onto the floor. For a moment, she simply stood there, staring at the torn apron hanging from her waist. She had been insulted before, but something about that moment broke through the wall she had built around herself. She thought about her mother, who had once worked 3 jobs to keep their family alive. She remembered being told, as a child, that honest work was never shameful. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but Hannah refused to retaliate. Instead, she quietly bent down and began collecting the broken pieces of glass. That was when the restaurant doors opened. Jonathan Brooks walked inside. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit, his expression serious, and rainwater still clung to his coat. He had come straight from the airport after returning from a business trip. He had planned to surprise Hannah with dinner, but the moment he saw her kneeling on the floor with a torn apron and tears in her eyes, his entire expression changed. Jonathan looked at Hannah first. Then he looked at Victoria. The restaurant manager, Marcus Reed, hurried toward him, suddenly realizing exactly who had entered. Everyone in the room knew Jonathan Brooks. His company had recently purchased a major technology firm, and his name appeared regularly in business magazines. But Jonathan wasn't looking at the customers, the manager, or the expensive dining room. He was looking at his wife. Jonathan walked directly to Hannah, removed his coat, and gently placed it around her shoulders. Hannah tried to tell him she was fine, but he could see that she wasn't. He then turned toward Victoria, whose confidence had disappeared completely. The manager finally explained what had happened. Jonathan's voice remained calm, but the disappointment in his face was unmistakable. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten anyone. Instead, he asked one simple question: why had an employee been treated that way? Victoria suddenly realized that the poor waitress she had humiliated was not poor at all. She was Hannah Brooks, the wife of the billionaire standing only a few feet away. The realization spread through the restaurant like electricity. But Jonathan didn't use his wealth to humiliate Victoria in return. He told the manager that Hannah's job should never have been necessary for her to deserve respect. He said that even if Hannah had been struggling to pay rent, wearing a torn uniform, or working 2 jobs just to survive, she would still deserve exactly the same dignity. Then he revealed something nobody expected. He had secretly been considering investing in Belmont House, but after seeing how the staff were treated, he would not make any decision until the restaurant changed its employee policies and promised better protection for its workers. Victoria's face fell. Her embarrassment was obvious, but Hannah surprised everyone again. Instead of demanding revenge, she asked Jonathan not to destroy anyone's future because of one terrible afternoon. She said people could make mistakes, but they should be given a chance to learn from them. Jonathan looked at her with pride. The restaurant manager apologized to Hannah and offered her a promotion, but Hannah requested something more important. She asked him to create a formal policy protecting employees from verbal and physical abuse, and to establish a small emergency fund for workers facing financial hardship. Months later, Belmont House became known not only for its food, but also for how it treated its employees. Hannah helped create a program that provided assistance to restaurant workers across Chicago who were struggling with rent, medical bills, or family emergencies. Jonathan funded the program quietly, refusing to put his name on it. Victoria eventually sent Hannah a handwritten apology. It wasn't perfect, and it couldn't erase what had happened, but it was sincere. Hannah accepted it, not because Victoria deserved forgiveness, but because Hannah refused to carry bitterness for the rest of her life. One rainy evening, Hannah stood outside Belmont House beside Jonathan, watching employees leave after their shifts. She looked at the same restaurant where she had once stood with a torn apron and tears in her eyes. The memory still hurt, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned that wealth could buy comfort, influence, and beautiful things, but it could never buy character. Character was revealed in the way people treated those who had nothing to offer them. And sometimes, the person you look down on may be the very person capable of changing your life. If this story touched your heart, please support the video with a like, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and subscribe for more stories about kindness, dignity, and second chances. And before the story ends, comment, "Kindness always wins." If you believe every person deserves respect, no matter their job, clothing, or social status. Because Hannah's torn apron was eventually replaced, but the lesson behind it remained forever. Never judge someone's worth by what they appear to have. The person standing quietly in front of you may be carrying a story and a strength you could never imagine.